Are EPL managers being given enough time to build winning clubs?
Well, the average time for a Premier League manager is to be at a club is 2 years, or a little over 2 years. And I think this depends on the situation, your perspective as a club. It depends how close you are to the relegation zone, how long are you going to get. Now, because they have been, you've got 3 or 4 clubs, Southampton twice this season, Leeds, Wolves and Everton. They've already pulled the trigger on the manager that they've had. And so they've had to make a change because they cannot afford to get relegated. And that's why those have all made the changes. Now, Chelsea, like we said earlier on in the show, there's no threat to them for being relegated. There's no threat really of getting top 4 now. So they're going to give Potter more time. And so he hopefully, or maybe I should say, he might get more time. Not a lot more time. And I can understand owners looking at the bank balance and thinking and saying, well, look, I've spent all this money. You better do something with it, if you're Potter. But if he gets more time, if you're down at the bottom, then you're on thin ice very quickly, very, very quickly.
How many times did people think Mikel Arteta was going to be fired at Arsenal when we did the radio, when we were doing the show on radio? Repeatedly, that was one of the questions that we would get on social media was, is Arteta going to be fired this week? And they were patient with him. They ended up winning the FA Cup that year, and then look how their patience was rewarded. I'm not saying you continue to go the wrong way down the interstate just to prove the point and just that you can show patience. But I look at a Graham Potter. I would love to see what Graham Potter can do with Chelsea next year. You're right. They're not going to be relegated, and they're probably nothing they can do to make the top 4. Why not ride this out and make sure that the issue is not just the injuries you've dealt with and buying on the wrong players? But if you are a team that's about to get relegated, what do you have to lose, right? Why not pull the trigger and say, okay, didn't work with this guy, let's try with somebody else. Didn't work with this guy, let's try with somebody else, because you're about to lose so much money that what's $5 or $8 million more that you have to throw in the pot to try to make sure that you can make well into 9 figures by staying up at the Premier League. I don't think it's going to work out for them, but because most of them just don't flat have the talent to be able to stay in the Premier League, the teams that are looking to be relegated. Leeds might be the exception there, but they were built to play a certain way. And honestly, they've just never been the same team without Calvin Phillips kind of creating. So they don't have anybody that can create for them and just have a bunch of guys that can finish quickly if they press high. So I understand why they fire managers with so much money being on the line, but I think there have been a lot of guys over the years that I think if they were given the support by the boards, if they were given support by ownership, and part of this probably is an issue with, and I know I'm digging into Pandora's box a little bit here, foreign ownerships that don't really have a whole lot of investment in the club or investment in the community, and they just want to win now. No, that didn't work. Okay, let's go to the next one. Or we can't make money off of this right now, so I'm not going to spend money. So it's okay if we're bottom of the table because this is just an investment piece for me as opposed to wanting to win and wanting the club to be successful. So I think when you put all of those things together, there's so much money on the line. You have a lot of people that just won't invest necessarily. I remember you going through Burnley last year when we were doing this on radio, and you said you mentioned that the new ownership there kind of looked at it and said, "Man, we're okay going down one time, right? Because to get our books in order, and because we're financially that's a place where we can rebuild this thing is by dropping down the championship and getting back up." Someone that's from Burnley that grew up rooting for Burnley would do whatever it took that they could possibly afford to make sure that didn't happen. So you have some clubs that are going to go down, but you might as well try a new manager and see with what you have if you can keep your team up when you have the chance. Because it isn't like, outside of teams that are a train wreck, like Spurs have fired a ton of managers because they're a train wreck and they're not going to spend, right? They have Chelsea aspirations, Aston Villa wallet. That's what Spurs have, and that's why they've gone through so many managers. And they're going to go through Conte again, too, because they still won't spend. So I just look at it and say, sometimes you're going the wrong way, and I think it's situational, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm taking the long road around to say that. Villa did not make a mistake getting rid of Steven Gerrard, right?
Right. No, absolutely not. No.
So it's situational, even though I know he's a good manager. It just didn't work out there, and there's no reason for them to have shown patience with Steven Gerrard because you knew you were heading the wrong way down the road.
Yeah, and likewise, Man United. But for the last 10 years, they've had 8 managers, if you include the two guys just sitting in, temporary managers, caretakers. 8 managers they've gone through before Ten Hag. Because how United were performing wasn't good enough for Manchester United. So for their situation, it wasn't right. The fans let the owners know, and that's not a great relationship anyway. So they just had to change. And finally, they've come up with the right one. Yeah, some people might think that's crazy, but for Manchester United, that was Man United. They just kept going until they found the right guy. A lot of clubs can't do that. Can't afford to keep paying managers off. But if you're down the bottom, it's like you say, you've got nothing to lose. It's your last chance. It's your last chance, really, because you can't buy more players. You've just got to turn the mindset around, and hopefully that a positive manager can come in and galvanize the players that you've got, because those players aren't bad players. They're all Premier League players. They're players that have gone through unbelievable sort of sacrifices and work to get to where they're at. So they're not all bad players, but morale goes down. They're human. Morale, confidence dips, and sometimes that new guy you roll the dice, that new guy can just turn things around. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Let me ask you this. Is there a guy out there that you look at that's been fired in the last year and a half? Do you think he could have been the next Mikel Arteta had they given him patience?
You know, you think Gerrard, you mentioned Gerrard, something went wrong there, and he stripped Tyrone Mings of the captaincy, I believe, at Villa. And that didn't go down well, apparently, in the dressing room. So, like you say, he worked wonders at Rangers, did absolutely fantastic things at Rangers, steps into a club in the Premier League. He knows the Premier League. He knows what he wants. For years, he was one of the best players in the Premier League. So he knows how a manager should act. He knows what a manager should say. He knows what turns players off, because he's been there on the other side as well. A lot of these managers haven't been players at this level. I don't know. Maybe that's an advantage. I'm not sure, but you'd think it was an advantage that he'd seen both sides of the fence. So I expect Gerrard to come back. Maybe come back a different guy, and I always thought he'd be a quality coach. But hey, it just shows you never know.